Greetings and salutations. No, I haven't done a video about computers in a while, but some stuff has come up that I want to talk about. Namely, Windows 11, which was quote-unquote released by Microsoft last week. I'm not sure what state it's in, whether it's in beta or whether it's officially out. I have no idea. I didn't pay that much attention to it, other than I did see a couple of videos a while back previewing this lovely desktop experience that Windows 11 is supposed to bring us. Quite honestly, I didn't care too much until somebody this morning sent me a link to a video. And in the video, the fellow was telling about how he wanted to try Windows 11, and he had 7 PCs in the house, and he couldn't get Windows 11 to run on any of them because Windows 11 is not going to run on your computer unless it is very, very new. And this bothers me deeply because it's the same crap they pulled with Windows Vista so many years ago. That's been more than 15 years ago now. What a disaster that was. And they're fixing to do it again. So I went looking around for information about this, and I jumped over to this article, which is from Wired, and the headline is Windows 11 Security Push Puts Microsoft on a Collision Course. The excuse they're using for this is security. This is the same excuse they used to push UEFI down our throats, which made it hard to install any alternative operating system and left Linux and Unix developers scrambling to try and catch up. Well, this time around, they've just drawn these arbitrary lines in the sand and said, we're not going to support anything before a certain date. And the computers that you want to run this on, they have to have UEFI. The hard drive has to be formatted GPT. There must be a TBM 2.0 chip on the board, and it has to be enabled. The gotcha is the processors. It says here that you can't run any Intel Core processor that was made before 2017. And then as far as AMD Zen 2 processors are concerned, your Ryzen's 2019. That's just a couple of years ago, man. Which means that a whole bunch of you that are watching this video on your computer, regardless of what operating system you're currently running, you're not going to be able to even think about installing Windows 11. Windows 10 will continue to be supported until October the 14th of 2025. So they are giving us a little time for the transition. However, Microsoft has a history of when they are supporting 2 operating systems. This is exactly what they did with Windows 7 and the transition from Windows 7, 8 to 10. That they'll send down updates that intentionally screw up the older operating system, forcing neophyte Windows users to upgrade not only their operating system in this case, but most likely have to go out and buy a new computer, which they don't need. Most people who run Windows, and Linux for that matter, have way more hardware than they need. They have more memory than they need. They have more processing power than they need. I mean, unless you're a gamer or you're video editing or you're doing some sort of high-end stuff, you really don't need the power of modern computers. And the thing about that is that so many people are going to now be forced to go out and buy a new machine. Of course, this is a bonanza for all the hardware manufacturers out there trying to push new hardware down people's throats. And of course, that's exactly what Microsoft is trying to do, is make it attractive to ship Windows 11 hardware, right? Why upgrade in place when you can just go buy a new machine? That's the attitude here. And it will create e-waste on a scale like you will not believe. Now, you're probably saying to yourself, since this is a Linux-related channel, Joe must be about to tell us that this is a great opportunity for Linux people to jump up and spread the word and tell people there's an alternative. Not really. Because I'll tell you what, there have been opportunities in the recent past, like when Windows 10 was forced down users' throats, even before that when Windows XP went kerplooey. There have been opportunities in the past to do just that, and the Linux community hasn't really stepped up to the plate, which is an American term that comes from baseball, in case you're somewhere around the world, and it means get your shit together and get yourself unified and put out a unified message that says, hey, we're here and we can work for you. Linux doesn't do that. What Linux does is have tribal warfare over which distro is better. What Linux does is go around telling people not to pronounce it GNOME anymore and tell them that they're evil if they don't say GNOME. That's what Linux does. And that's what they'll continue to do because that's the state of the community. Windows XP was on its deathbed when I started pushing Linux really hard in 2014 and 2015 and founded Easy Linux and all this stuff that I did. And I was shocked at how the Linux community didn't really push that at that time. And the other thing that we have to deal with is that as far as the Windows community is concerned, Linux is a joke. As a matter of fact, on the video that I mentioned earlier, I happened to say, well, there is an alternative, Linux, and it will run on your 7 PCs for years to come, most likely. And the response to that was really quite interesting because most people really took a sarcastic, nasty attitude toward it. Like, there aren't any drivers for Linux. One person says, and yeah, I can't use any of my games. So they said that they were laughing their ass off. And this is really the tone of the comments. The same garbage we've heard over and over and over and over again. Now, as far as drivers is concerned, that's really not that big of an issue these days. Somebody pointed out that it probably wouldn't work with their printer. They could be telling the truth. I don't know what kind of printer they have. But it's the tone of what people say. If you step outside of the community and mention Linux, you're going to get laughed at. And the main reason for that is because the Linux developers and the community at large have done a really crappy job of addressing the main issue that people have with Linux, and that's compatibility with the software that they're trapped in. If you run Linux, you're not going to run Adobe products. You're not going to be able to run a whole lot of games unless you run Steam. And then, even if you do have Proton, it may or may not work. I know that because that happens with my son. And these are realities that Linux doesn't really want to talk about or it makes excuses for. The desktop itself, the Linux desktop, is better than it ever was. It's unbelievably good. Super stable. It works with a lot of different hardware out there. It'll keep your old hardware running. I mean, I can't run Windows 11 on anything in my house. Even the work PC that I have that runs Windows 10 right now is not going to run Windows 11. But it can run Linux. It barely runs Windows 10, to tell you the truth. We had to hack it to get that to work. But that's another story. But it'll run Linux just fine. The computer that I'm using right now to record this quote-unquote video, it's not really a video, it's just me ranting with stuff on the screen. It is 14, well, it's 2014. I almost said it was 14 years old. No, it's 2014. So what does that make it? It makes it 6 years old now? Well, that's ancient when it comes to computers. Windows 11 is not going to work on that. As a matter of fact, Windows 10 is not going to work on this machine because the latest drivers there are for it is Windows 7. You might be able to hack that in. I don't know. I haven't really tried hacking Windows 7 drivers to work on Windows 10, but you see, I run Linux, so I don't worry about stuff like that. Anyway, I digress. The desktop in Linux is great. The hardware compatibility is wonderful. The software compatibility, that's an issue. Because one of the things that you're going to hear is it won't run my games. I have to use Adobe products. I have specialized software that runs on Windows. Running wine is, for a lot of these people, way beyond their level of expertise. And virtual machines, that's another thing that's way beyond their level of expertise. I know that people have done that. They've switched over to Linux, and then they run whatever they have to in a virtual machine. And that's a big stretch for a neophyte computer user. That's a big stretch for somebody who doesn't really understand what's going on. It's like I tried to give tech support to some folks at work the other day, and I said, open a file manager. And you would have thought that I would have said something in a foreign language. What's a file manager? These people don't even know. This is your average Windows user. They know enough to get what they need to get done. They don't know better when it comes to installing Linux, installing a virtual machine on top of that. Nothing. And Linux has just not done that good of a job of marketing itself. And it's not going to do it this time. So not much is going to change. And I see Windows 11 as a coming disaster. Honestly. Wow, Microsoft. You really have done it this time. I mean, there's a lot of people within the Linux community who have been kissing Microsoft's ass for so long and schmoozing up to them. And we have the, Windows subsystem for Linux and all of this cross-pollination. This is what they're going to do with it. Windows 11, that's not going to run on any hardware that, by the way, can run an Android app. That's what Microsoft has done with that. And the truth of the matter is, if they're on the security kick, they could turn around and revoke the security certificate for Ubuntu. Because Ubuntu runs on hardware before 2019 if it's AMD or 2017 if it's Intel. They could start making it very difficult for alternative operating systems. Now, whether they will do that or not, I don't know. But if they're doing this to Windows, what are they going to do to Linux? What are they going to do to FreeBSD? These are questions that need answers. And I don't think the answers are very happy. I kind of hope that I'm wrong, and I'm kind of hoping that this video makes you think a little bit and that you will get something from my rant. Maybe I'll be proven wrong. But the last 10 years that I have spent working in and around the Linux community, it doesn't give me a whole lot of hope, to be quite honest. Can't wait to hear your comments on this one. Talk to you again soon. Thanks for watching.